this might be the first time someone's recorded a podcast inside the Sainte-Chapelle when they're totally by themselves. I'm walking down the main sort of avenue of this beautiful medieval church towards the chapel, surrounded by stained glass windows, and all I can hear is the echo of my own voice. Truly magical. Kind of frightening too. Hello? Hello? Hello, and hello to everybody out there. Oliver G here. This is the Earful Tower podcast, and you're listening to the A-B season, where S is for Sainte-Chapelle. That was an original tune from our maestro, Press Maxon. A little bit more on that original song in a moment, but I want to set the scene for today's episode. It's a bit different. I went to the Sainte-Chapelle Gothic Church from the 13th century, and I visited without crowds. I was able to do this because I was invited on a VIP tour by Walks Paris, a company that specializes in that kind of thing, and they said, come and check it out. I brought the photographer Augusta along. She took some amazing images of the church, probably like you've never seen it before, with me, a few with me in there, just walking around kind of bamboozled in my own solitude. And based on that visit, I researched a bit more about the Sainte-Chapelle. I called up friend of the show, Amber Minogue from the Paname podcast, who does guided tours of not only the Louvre, but the Sainte-Chapelle. And I sat down with her, weirdly enough, in the Saint-Paul Gardens, the Jardin Saint-Paul in the Marais. We sat outside, freezing cold with blankets on our knees. It was the only quiet place I could find in the Marais. And we talked about this amazing church. So that's what you're about to hear. Me and Amber talking about the church, me asking about what she knows, her asking about my experience being in there alone. All the relevant links will be down below, including a link to find more from Press Maxon. And speaking of Press, here's what he wrote. This week's S episode for Sainte-Chapelle is another good example of a moment when I knew what I was looking for in a song, but I just couldn't find the perfect match. So I wrote one myself. I wanted the sonic colors on this to be just as vibrant as all that stained glass. From a distance, I love that the colors bleed together, but as you get closer, the image gets clearer, more rich. Plus, you're so surrounded, it's dizzying. So I went for a few moments like that. And since we're back in a church, I went straight to my organ. This song is called Saint Kaleidoscope. Enjoy. I love it, Press. You've done it again. Let's hear a little bit more of that music before we head to the Marais with Amber Minogue. Amber Minogue.
Oliver G.
It's cold.
Very cold.
We're sitting in the Jardin Saint-Paul.
Yes.
I think you're more of a fan of it in here than I am.
I like it because it's competing with the wall.
That's why. The wall's nearby and I'm always there, and you're more drawn towards the
cute shops.
Cute shops and the Gardens of the King, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. But enough about that, because we want to talk not about kings but saints. And I think the idea is we're going to interview each other a little bit. Okay. Because we both have different stories of Sainte-Chapelle. Or as the man next to us in the restaurant says, Sainte-Chapelle. Should we start with that, the pronunciation? I mean, thing is with this church? Yeah. Let's start at the very beginning. The thing is with this church is there's a mystery enshrouding it that begins with pronunciation. I always thought it was just Sainte-Chapelle, and then I turned to the French guys next to us at lunch, and they were like, no, there's an E at the end, it's feminine, Sainte-Chapelle, yeah. Sainte-Chapelle. And that's just where the mystery begins. The second thing is, what is it, and why is it so gosh forsaken popular. And I was hoping you could help me a little bit with that.
I can. Come along, yes.
Bonjour. Oh, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Désolée,
Non, c'est parfait, merci beaucoup.
Du sucre pour le café.
Moi, ça va.
Ça va.
Ça marche.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Un petit peu. Comme
Ah
ça.
oui, ouais.
Vous pouvez parler, ça va. Authentique.
Non, bah, tant mieux.
Hop.
Et si vous voulez, on peut vous faire des petits desserts.
Okay,
Ah, c'est gentil, merci.
French lesson, she offered dessert, if anyone was listening.
Always dessert.
So let's rewind a bit. You've been doing tours in Sainte-Chapelle, and you know a thing or two about the place. For people listening at home going, it's just two words to me. Can you give us sort of the idiot's guide to it? What is this place?
So the Sainte-Chapelle, I just say the Sainte-Chapelle. We're just going to carry on as best we can. It's really beautiful. So it is originally built by Saint Louis, one of the big Louis, so many Louis, but he's Louis IX, Saint Louis. And he buys the crown of thorns. So very important relic for Christians and Catholics. And of course he needs to keep it somewhere suitably fancy. And so he builds the Sainte-Chapelle as a reliquary. So somewhere to hold the relics that he buys, amongst which was the crown of thorns and many others. There's 22 relics that he buys. And the crown of thorns is still in France today. It was kept in Notre Dame, and of course Notre Dame burnt, and they saved the crown of thorns. They put it in the Louvre, and it only goes on display at Holy Week. So the Sainte-Chapelle now is more of a monument. You know, we just go and visit. There's no services. It's not really used as a church anymore, although they do concerts there. So if you like concerts, you know, like classical music and beautiful surroundings, like you can't go wrong booking tickets for a concert at Sainte-Chapelle.
A lot of people have told me that they've gone to see like Vivaldi or something in the Sainte-Chapelle, or any kind of music you can imagine as a setting that's just. Have you seen anything played there before?
No, I haven't. I've never been to any classical music concerts there.
On the list. Add it to the list. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But the other thing I think that draws people from around the world to this place is the stained glass windows. You know, a lot of churches around the whole universe have stained glass windows. What's the deal here? Why do people care so much?
Okay, so of course the reason now people go to the Sainte-Chapelle is for the stained glass windows, and it's got the biggest collection of 13th century stained glass. So Louis IX, 13th century. So it's built really quickly. The Sainte-Chapelle is built in 6 years, which is remarkable. So 1242, I think they start. And when you go in upstairs, it's almost like there are no walls. It's such an incredible feat of engineering. Today it would be remarkable. And so imagining that in the 13th century is just phenomenal. And it's got these huge stained glass windows. But it's different from cathedrals. So it's a much smaller place than a cathedral. It's not a very big place to go. And so you're really sort of the windows dominate it, and on a sunny day, you know, this light comes flooding in, and it's just breathtaking.
I'm glad you said sunny day, because I was thinking, I want to talk, like, it's busy. There's always crowds out the front. I think it probably puts a lot of people off, but I'm surprised too, because we were talking about this before. I think if you were to ask 100 people coming to Paris, I don't think all of them would say that is a top 5 for me. I don't think it's like it's busy and yet it's not popular. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's got that sort of, I don't know. It's similar to Mona Lisa to me. Like you said something before about there's a crowd to get. You spend more time. What did you say? More time.
Yeah, it's really long to get in because it's in the law courts, because it's in the sort of préfecture, just by there. So you spend ages going in, and security is really tight, and you spend sort of as long queuing to go in as you do in, because it is quite small inside. And once you sort of gasped at the windows, you sort of have to look around, and then most people leave. You know, it's not a long visit.
It's funny like that, isn't it? I think I can relate to it, and I struggle with this place. I think I've never talked about it on the podcast before. And it wasn't until, we will talk about this in a second, until I got in there by myself that I really gave it some thought. But there's, for me, that whole idea of lining up to get somewhere and then it being over so quickly puts me off. It's like Angelina for the hot chocolate, or dare I say it, Holy Belly for a pancake. If you got to line up just for a pancake, it kind of ruins the experience a little bit. For me, and I wonder if that's what happened with Sainte-Chapelle as well. That kind of leads me into talking the best way to visit. You said sunny day. Is this, you should plan it around the sun, do you think? Plan it around the hour? What's the...
No, I mean, it's true that at certain times of the day, some windows are obscured.
Hang on, what do you mean?
Well, depending where the sun is, sometimes some windows, they don't really have so much light coming through or, at certain angles. But even on a sort of overcast day, the windows it is still really remarkable. Like the light still comes through. So daylight, you don't want to go at 5 o'clock in a winter day because it is not going to be as impressive. But no, it's always good to see.
And what about in terms of visiting? Like you said, I think a lot of people would go and get their like wow moment and then be like, well, if you're not doing a guided tour and you're going to read up on it, it's kind of a wow moment and then you're out again. But you've been in there dozens and dozens of times. Are there sort of things that you'd recommend people make an effort to see, or is it like, how would you direct people?
I would say it's okay to go in and say wow and then go. I don't think you need to dive into everything. Like, I think it's worth queuing up, going in, because the wow is so amazing, and just be like, wow, that's amazing. And then if you are interested, there are a number of ways you can really delve into it. So obviously a guide is fantastic. They're going to give you a lot of the theology and ideas behind the windows, because the function of the windows is really different to how they are in most cathedrals. So in a lot of cathedrals and churches, the stained glass windows were designed for a public who couldn't read. And so they're the Bible in stone. They're telling you a story that you're meant to be able to read as a sort of illiterate person. And of course, they're really beautiful and all the rest of it. The stained glass windows here are almost impossible to read. They're so high up. You can have a look at the first few images and then you can't see it. So they have a very different function. So, of course, you can go and visit with a guide. There is an app that you can download and then you can look at the windows in more detail. There's loads of books you can get downstairs. So if you want to, you can dive in more, of course. But it's enough, I think, to just go and be like, wow, that's beautiful. What a feat of engineering. Okay, let's go get a cup of tea. Like, you don't have to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours and understand everything. You can just be like, wow.
Do you think like, I like to divide things up for people, first trip, second trip to Paris. Is this one of the things you should like knock out quickly when you come to Paris, or is this for a later visit? Is this more of an expert thing to see?
I don't know, great question. I mean, I think like in some ways it could just be a first visit, because you can just go in there and get in and get out, and it's on the Ile de la Cité, and it's not going to take up your whole day. You can fit it in. You get your tickets in advance, you give yourself a bit of time to queue up, you go and see it. So I think it's for any time. Quick wow. You go in first time, quick wow. Second time, second visit, get in there a bit more details.
It's like, it reminds me of the Louvre.
Yeah.
You get that first wow with a capital W for both W's and both the Louvre and the Sainte-Chapelle. But it's like there's so much more on offer if you want it. But I often say with these first time visit kind of things, like with the Louvre or Sainte-Chapelle, it's like anything you got to wait for, tick it off, like make sure you've seen it, and then on your second trip to Paris, that's where for me it really begins. You come back here, it's like, okay, let's go see something a bit off the beaten track, or do the things you've seen in a different way, which kind of leads me to I want to talk to you a bit about my experience of going in there.
Tell me.
Let's switch jobs here. You hold the
Okay, I've got the microphone.
Well, you're a podcaster as well, Paname podcast. So it's less about interviews though.
I don't have interviews because you're a journalist. I'm afraid of talking to people. And interviewing, you've got to like phone people and like get in there and like discover. And then interviewing is a massive skill. It's hard. You're good at it.
Got to be fearless, Amber. Got to be fearless. But thank you for the compliment. But maybe have a go at interviewing me.
Okay.
Because I want to talk about it.
Well, listen, I've been to the Sainte-Chapelle many, many times, and it has always been very busy. That wasn't your experience. Can you tell me about it?
Well, so this company called Walks Paris, they got in touch and they say, look, we're offering a VIP experience. And they said, the idea is in a group, you get into this famous church before there are any people there. Like half an hour, it's just you and the church. And it's always lovely to be invited to places like that. The tours that they offer are 150 euros per person. They offered it to me for free, and I said, I'm happy to come along and check it out, especially because access is one of my favorite things in Paris, and this is an opportunity I hadn't had. And also with Sainte-Chapelle, I've been before, and I wasn't racing to get back, but knowing it'd be empty really intrigued me. So we went there. You go through, there's a queue of people already there, and the guide just took us through maybe like 6 or 8 people. And then I did something I often do on these small group tours, is I let the guide chat to the people, and I just went in by myself. So there was a moment, you heard it at the start of the podcast, where I just walked away from everybody while they were talking about the stone carvings at the entry, you know? And I was like, I'm just going inside. And I had this moment, maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, just purely alone in there. And what really struck me, weirdly, was the floor. The floor. Because I think I mentioned it, but I think a lot of people go in there, even when there's 1 million people or 50 people, and you look up, you're always looking up. And so I think it's rare to see this huge floor with its beautiful tile patterns. And I don't know, I was just really captivated by it. Of course, the stained glass, but I feel like that wasn't really any different for if you'd be in there with 100 people, you know, same kind of vibe. But that, you can hear the echo in my voice just being in there was something really special.
It's interesting you should say the floor. I can see what you mean, because we do see the windows, we're all looking up, but having that emptiness, that space. And the floor originally, I believe, was meant to be in white marble, which would have reflected the windows even more. The floor has been redone. So, well, would you recommend going there with no one?
Totally honest response. I think if you have 150 euros to spare and you want a similar experience, go for it. If you certainly don't have 150 euros to spare, get up early and be the first in line. You'll still get a few seconds. You know, if I was a student and I wanted that experience, I'd just be first in line. And then when they let me in, I'd run up all the steps and have a few minutes in there by myself. So you've got options. But when we were in there, we were with a guide, and it was great. And there are lots of other guides who I'm sure do great jobs. Amber, I know you do. You do the Sainte-Chapelle as well as the Louvre and stuff. And we can put links to everything down below. But yeah, I think the tour I did with Walks, they went to the conciergerie after, they went to Notre Dame after, out the front, and it was really cool. Learned something. I never would have done more than the wow if I went to Sainte-Chapelle by myself, so that was cool. I said it at the intro, it's kind of weird, frightening. I just remembered that. I used the word frightening being in there by myself. I don't know why I used it. It was a couple of months ago that I went, but I think it was 800 years of history and being sort of like, you know, I love that Philippe Auguste wall we talked about. That's also 800 years old, but it's not, there's nothing frightening about it. It's just there. It's old. It looks old. But this Sainte-Chapelle, there was some kind of energy, like a inexplicable energy, and apparently it frightened me. I don't know. Do you do therapy on the side, Emma? Maybe you could help me.
I mean, I don't do therapy, but I know what you mean. Like, frightening is not a word that would come to mind. There is something very sort of awe-inspiring and overwhelming a little bit. Because remember, this was not a public place. This was for the king and only the most important people going in there. So you are sort of entering this very sacred space. So yeah, I mean, I can really see that. It must have been very special. One last question. For you then, would it be the first visit, second visit, third visit? Same question you asked me.
I think with, I think anything that's too popular, get it done on the first visit. That's what I think. Eiffel Tower, definitely. Just do it. People ask me that. Should I see the Eiffel Tower? Yeah, definitely. Go climb it. Louvre, everything. Just knock it all off and hit all these things that are famous for a reason. Even maybe Disneyland. I've not been there, but you know what I mean? Like, just tick it all off and then get a real taste for it. And then when you come back and start, like, I meet a lot of listeners to this show who have come 20 times, and the more you come, I think the more you visit, the more the city opens up. And so yeah, I'd say do Sainte-Chapelle, get the queuing out of the way so that on your second, third, fourth trip you can spend that queue time in a cafe on a terrace watching the world go by, live a little bit more like a local. So yeah, do it as a first time trip. I think remember to not just take pictures of the stained glass with no one in it. Capture the whole vibe. If there are people there, capture the vibe, remember it as it is, and if you're in there with the floor empty as I had it, take pictures of that. Speaking of, I brought Augusta, the photographer, and she took some amazing pictures, including one of me walking around like a Wally. With, what am I doing here? Looking frightened. So I'll show you that one.
I'm looking forward to seeing those pictures.
On that note, we'll have a little bit more music from Press Maxon, and then I'll be back with a little bit more information at the end. But Amber Minogue, thank you very much for sharing coffee and your knowledge with me.
You're very welcome, Oliver G.
So there it is, the Sainte-Chapelle. Technically a chapel, not a church, but I think you'll be forgiven for calling it a church. Really worth a visit. Make sure you skip the line. Now, the tour company that I mentioned, Walks, they offered past tense VIP alone in the Sainte-Chapelle. But as I understand, for the foreseeable future, it's either booked up or it's not available. But I'll still link to it as well below so you can try and snag a spot. Otherwise, they do skip the line tours all the time. So you can book that one with them if you prefer. Amber, who you heard on the podcast, she does tours of Sainte-Chapelle and the Louvre. You can get in contact with us, contact@theeiffeltower.com to book one of those. Otherwise, I just want to say this show's brought to you by Patreon supporters on patreon.com/theeiffeltower. That's how this show rolls. Thanks to all the supporters. Very soon, sometime this month in November, you'll be getting the updated 7th edition of our Guide to Paris, the PDF guide, which has hundreds of tips based on all the episodes that I've been doing and all my discoveries. You can get that for free if you're a Patreon supporter or Substack paid subscriber. Otherwise, I'll be selling it in my online store. More info on that soon. Thanks again to Amber Minogue. Thanks to Walks in Paris. Thanks to Press Maxon for the wonderful music. Thanks to Augusta Sagnelli, who took lovely pictures of our visit to Sainte-Chapelle. That will be on social media and the blog this week. And thanks to Eddie G for editing this episode so nicely. Keep up the great work, editor. As for everybody else, have a lovely week wherever you are. This is the Eiffel Tower. My name's Oliver G. And merci beaucoup. Au revoir.